of meta-coaching as a system. I've asked my wife, Geraldine, to join me so that from time to time she'll be asking questions on some of the slides that we'll be showing, questions that probably some of you have, and questions that normally come up about the different facets of meta-coaching. So we begin with what meta-coaching is, and it's an intensive conversation, focused conversation designed to facilitate the processes whereby a person can unleash their highest potentials and get to the very heart of things, that person's meanings. So there's our opening definition. Coaching is a conversation. Coaching began in 1992 with Thomas Leonard, and Thomas Leonard was an accountant, and he was helping people reach goals. And so he found a lot of self-help tools to help people reach their goals. At first, financial goals, and then later, health goals and relationship goals. And so coaching began pretty eclectic. That is, just finding some self-help tools and applying them to a person so that their life would go easier and they would be more empowered. In the year 2000, I decided to create meta-coaching, and for 2 years I interviewed some expert coaches and began thinking about how to systematically structure a coaching program. 2002, we launched the first meta-coaching training in Sydney, Australia. And the thing about meta-coaching is that it is intensely focused conversation, and it's designed specifically for one thing, not merely self-help, but for facilitating the processes inside of any and every person, which is part of the unleashing process. How do we unleash potential? How do we detect a potential? And how do we bring that potential so it's actual? And the answer is a very focused, personal conversation that gets to the meanings and reframes the meanings. Our second definition of meta-coaching, it's a conversation that facilitates generative and systemic change. So when we think about coaching, the first question really is, what do you want to change? At what level do you want to change that? And you want to change that from what to what? So it's going to generate something new, something different, something improved. It may be the way you think, it may be what you believe, it may be where you feel, it may be the relationships, it may be the direction of your life. So a generative and systemic change to your outcome, to whatever you truly want, which is going to mobilize your resources, your internal resources, and inspire you to be the very best version of you. And so this is the focus of coaching, a conversation that takes you inside to your meanings. And most of this is unconscious for most people. And so the coach has to know how to invite a person inside and introduce the person to themselves. A lot of variables. And if you look at all the list of variables here, coaching is in communication. Coaching is from one state of mind-body to another state. So it's going to involve emotions. It's going to involve the things that we need, the drives that drive us. It's going to involve how we think and the different kinds of thinking that we do and the different levels of thinking we do. Most uniquely, it's going to involve how we think about our thinking, the self-reflexivity. And this is the special kind of consciousness that human beings have. And because we have this kind of consciousness, if you don't know how to manage it well, it will be to your detriment. And you will be now in self-attack or self-abuse. And now it's a great way to sabotage your best efforts. So working with self-reflexivity, working with the mind-body emotion system. So it involves body work, it involves how you feel, your physiology, your neurology. It involves the change process. It involves, just intimately, the implementation process of how you make something real and the unleashing of potential. So, so many variables that go into coaching. And now the question is, how do we put all that together? How do we organize that? How do you organize it in your mind so that you understand what you're doing at any given time?
Yeah, and the answer is?
Well, we'll be coming up to that. So many variables, so little structure. Now, after 20 years of MENA coach training in 60, 70 countries, one of the things that people say they most appreciate about MENA coaching is the fact that it has a structure. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, the structure of MENA coaching. And what MENA coaches say is that it gives me a structural way of operating and knowing what to do, when to do it, how to do it. So here are some of the structures. We got a list here. And the first structure that we have on this list is structures. Go back to one more back. That one there. So the first structure is for connection. Obviously, as a coach, if you don't know how to really connect with a client, then the coaching is going to go nowhere. You may be talking till you're blue in the face, but until you can make that intimate connection and the person trusts you. So that's the very first thing. We got structures for that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And some of the skills, listening, supporting, rapport building is building up the trust. A lot of times people who come to coaching are so frustrated, so upset, so disempowered, so angry, so anxious that connecting with them takes some work because they're not in the most easy place to be. And so this becomes the coach's work to make that connection. We also then make a contract. So what is this relationship about? What can you depend on me for doing? What do you want? And so the contract, we use the well-formed outcome questions to create that contract. The contract then lets the client set the agenda. And for us, this is what coaching is all about. The client sets the agenda, not the coach. And this is something that really makes coaching so different from therapy or consulting or problem solving or other helping professions. The client is the expert of himself, herself. And so we want to know, what do you want to change? We want to know, what do you want? And here's the paradox of that question. Most clients don't know what they want. And so we help them and we facilitate them. And we have a tool, it's called the well-formed outcome questions. We have a structure for identifying coaching conversations. In just a moment, we'll look at 7 of the most basic coaching conversations and how the conversation goes. If you don't know what kind of conversation you're having, then you won't know strategically where you stand in relationship to the client. And so knowing that, and we have a structure for coaching conversations, how they operate, their design, tools that you can use to make each of those conversations work. There is a structure for facilitating change and transformation. We'll get to that later as we talk about the axes of change. We'll also talk about the crucible and the fires of change. There's structure for facilitating unleashing potential. And so we'll be looking at the D needs, deficiency needs, the B needs, the things that we need as human beings, and then how do I satisfy, how do I gratify that legitimate need? How do I prevent it from becoming a neurotic need so that in satisfying the need, it unleashes energy and vitality so that I become more of who I can become. And so we use the self-actualization quadrants for that. And we have lots of processes for this unleashing people so that they can be fully alive. That's vitality, fully human, so that their humanity develops. And they become more loving and caring, compassionate, more appreciative, more honoring of each other. And finally, structures for handling coaching problems. All sorts of problems can arise, and we have structures for that. So as we begin meta-coaching and looking at the different structures, here are a number of structures that is an overview of the whole system.
Okay, so given that there's a lot of variables to keep in mind for a coach, and at the same time knowing these structures, how best for a coach to learn these structures?
One by one.
Okay, which comes first? So is this sequential?
The first one, connection.
Yeah. And then followed by the
Contract.
Contract. Yeah, I remember you keep on emphasizing that we don't start a coaching session without the contract before even any intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also thinking in a way procedurally, which
Yeah.
I'm guessing it will be a challenge for options people.
Yeah. Yep. They'll, if you're always looking for an alternative, a different way of doing it, you'll not learn the foundation of the expertise. Expertise comes from learning it well until it is foundational.
Okay. And so also for the different kinds of conversation, coaching conversation, I remember in one of the ACMCs you were saying that we need to memorize the structure of each coaching conversation.
Well, this is a part of how we learn. If you want to learn thoroughly and you want to learn in depth, there are some things to memorize, like the alphabet. If you want to read, you need to memorize the alphabet. Once you learn it, you can forget it because it's now foundational. It's like music. You need to learn the notes.
Okay, so as you say that, what comes to my mind is as you keep on emphasizing ACMC, memorize the 18 questions and ask them specifically the way it should be asked,
Exactly.
not your own version. And then now you're also telling us also to memorize the different kinds of coaching conversation.
Let's do one at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself by doing all of them at once.
Okay.
Do one at a time. Once you get that down, then go to the next level of development, the next level, the next level. So one at a time.
So what I find, correct me if I'm wrong, what I find useful is like when I coach and I do like similar to a case study, I mean reviewing the conversation, is that a good way to help memorize the kind of conversation as a coach reflects on?
Well,
or
that's,
is it like prior to even having any coaching
yeah, much prior to
conversation?
that. So here are our coaching conversations. When we start, and clients very seldom know with real clarity what they want, so the first conversation you always have is a clarity conversation. What do you want? What do you mean by leadership? What do you mean by delegation? What do you mean by health? And whatever they say, clarify that. And probably you have to chase it down 5 to 7 times before you'll get a see, hear, feel referent. And so the clarity conversation. We've got a tool in NLP, it's called the META model, which helps us to get specificity and precision. And specificity and precision is very healing because now you are in contact with reality instead of a global vagueness and imprecision. You can't shoot any target. You can't take a bow and arrow and hit the bullseye if you are not specific about where is the bullseye and what is it. And so specificity is the beginning. Once people get some clarity, now we need to ask them another question. Have you decided, raise your hand, repeat after me, so help me God, I am going to Because if a person isn't decided, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't, you're not going to help them to reach their goals. You've got to get some commitment. And so a decision is based upon values. What's the advantage of it? What's the disadvantage? There's always both sides. If there wasn't both sides, if it was all advantage, then there'd be no decision to be made. It just, we'll do it. But there's always a price to pay. So what's the disadvantage? What's the cons about this? And helping a person think it through, now they're going to be more intentional and deliberate and mindful. And this is a very healing thing for a human being. Once a person has made a decision, yes, I want that. Okay, what kind of a plan do you have? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a way of doing it? How are you going to do it? How are you going to lose weight? How are you going to have better fitness? How are you going to be more friendly? How are you going to ask for that raise? How are you? So the how-to comes with the planning. Do you have a plan, and what is that plan? Next, we go to resources. And there's two of us speaking. We go to resources. Do you have the resources to make the plan work? And so we need resources. Sometimes we need an experience. So the coach will give the client an experience, sometimes a role play, sometimes some homework or some tasking where the person goes and now has an experience and then come back and they're developing the ability now to do something. As we look for that resource, we may instead, first of all, what has to change so that you can get what you want? And so the change conversation and the change process, we got the axes of change to facilitate that conversation. And sometimes we need to do confrontation. And confrontation is something anybody who really wants to be true to themselves and fulfill their highest dreams and goals, they want to be confronted with everything that sabotages them. I do. If I want a goal, I also want to know what's my blind spots. Where could I be self-deluded and self-deceived? And so give me some feedback on what you may see in me whereby I'm sabotaging myself. And so confrontation is needed. We call it feedback. The coach giving feedback. Let me give you some feedback about what I'm experiencing. It may not be accurate. It may be a wild guess, but let me give it to you. Just see what you think. So we give feedback, and we look for feedback, and sometimes this is very confrontational. Sometimes the client has misdiagnosed. The client just doesn't understand accurately and truly what's going on in his or her life. And so because they don't understand, they have misdiagnosed it. And they think the solution is something else. Oftentimes, the solution that they're trying to work is the problem. And they need to be confronted.
So
Then the final one here is mediation. And that's when I'm in conflict with someone and we try to have a conversation, but it's really difficult. So the two come into a coach, and the coach facilitates them listening to each other, hearing each other, and working out a win-win arrangement. So those are the 7 most basic coaching conversations. There's many more. There's group and team coaching conversations, executive coaching conversations. There's many more, political coaching conversations, but these are the 7 most basic.
So which we have to know by heart.
Well, once again, start with the simplest, clarity, then decision, then planning, so that you know how to negotiate and navigate that conversation.
So when you speak about the clarity, so with the meta model, I remember reading the Communication Magic, and it's about the meta model. And personally, I consider that the alphabet actually
Yeah.
it starts before we can
Yeah.
even form words, because what I noticed, even if we memorize the WFO, the well formed, but we're not asking clarity checks, we're not meta modeling it.
Yep.
So that would be the basic of the basic, the foundational structure.
This is why in meta coaching we require NLP as our first module. So before you can even get into meta coaching, you need to know the communication model that's called neuro-linguistic programming. And the meta model is at the essence of that, as well as some meta programs, the strategy model, pacing, rapport building, connecting with people. So all of that is foundational, and it really starts with that first conversation. And the thing to know about these 7 is to know these distinctions so that you can say to your client, which of these 7 conversations do you want to have? Are you clear about what you want? Have you made a commitment about what you want? Do you have a plan about what you want? Because if you can do that, then you can pretty well navigate the coaching conversations over a period of time in a coaching program and really enable and help that person.
As you're saying that, what comes to mind is you're also helping as a coach, we're also helping the client not just think clearly, but also seeing the structure of how they think or what they want.
That will come. It'll come later with some other tools that we have. But most of the time, clients are so caught up with content
Right.
that they're not aware of their thinking processes. This is one of the things we give feedback on. And maybe confront the person that the way you're thinking is the problem. And we need to change that way of thinking.
All right. Just a question about the diagram that you put there. So the ones below that is what we are going to be looking for or be doing. Like when we confront, we can inquire, tease, or be indirect.
Yeah, these are some of the
frame.
tools.
Okay.
They're just real brief
Yes.
number of them. Here are our coaching conversations again, the 7 most basic coaching conversations. And I think almost every single time you sit down with a human being, start with that clarity and then check the decision. You may have had many conversations with them, but things change. As people live their lives, things change, things come up. And so now rechecking and seeing where they are with these conversations. Here's the landscape of coaching. And beginning with the present state, every client wants to go to the desired state, whatever that desired state is. So what do you want? And in the process, we've got to find out, do you know how to get there? And what could stop you? And do you have the resources? And the things that you need to do, they're within your control, your power to do, or someone else's power. So the process are these 18 questions of the well-formed outcome pattern that helps us to manage that. And it seems like coaching, in most coaching programs all around the world, they just stay at that level. And that level where the little person is there moving forward is the primary state level. It's what you can see and hear and feel from a person. But coaching mostly occurs at the higher level, at the meta place. All of the things that's in the person's conscious and unconscious mind. And so true coaching takes a person inside what we're going to call the meta place. And if you can win that game, we call it the inner game, if you can win that inner game, then the outer game becomes easy. Piece of cake, a cinch. And so in the landscape, we start to measure out, where are you now? What's going on now? And how bad are things now? How bad will things get if you don't develop, grow, learn, change? And so the present state. And spending a little time on the present state to understand that is the beginning of the well-formed outcome questions. And then where do they want to go? Inside of the well-formed outcome questions, we have 5 of the questions that takes a person to the meta place. The first question that does that is question 3 in the well-formed outcome. Why do you want this? Why is this important to you? And so we go to the person's values. Later, we ask them the resource question. What internal resources do you need? And then the decision question, have you made a commitment? And so going to the higher level. Here is a diagram. For most people in meta coaching, this will be a fairly new diagram of the meta place and the landscape. And so now the present primary state, there at the very bottom, and the dotted line there represents thinking. And it could represent clear thinking, considering and questioning and representing, or it could include all of the cognitive distortions, exaggerating, personalizing, doing all the things that mess up and distort thinking and what we think. And so from thinking comes the movie that you play in your mind, representations. And that movie you play in your mind may be accurate enough as a mental map to guide you where you want to go. It may not. Commonly, it does not. We distort that movie, and so we can edit that movie. From that movie, how you represent things, then you draw conclusions, and we call those beliefs. So you draw a conclusion. What I have learned from this, when I think about this and represent this, see this, hear this, feel this, what I have learned is this, and now we have a belief. And so starting with belief, and it's beliefs all the way up, we have a metastating funnel, and it includes every one of the meta levels. And there's lots and lots of meta levels. Beliefs, values, identity, permission, prohibition, framing, meaning, memory, imagination, assumptions, intentions, and on and on and on. And this is what goes on inside of each one of our mind, and this is our reality, our subjective reality. And the thing about subjective reality, we all think it's real. Of course, we can test it. Does it translate into reality? And that's where, if it doesn't work, if I can't get myself to have the experiences I want to have and to go to the places I want to go, then something is probably wrong with the internal subjective reality inside. And so that's where we go. That's where we go in coaching to help a person build up the beliefs, the values, the intentions, the memories, the imaginations that's going to create a wonderful internal world which translates into the outer world. And then we find things that are problematic up there, maybe memories of trauma, memories of hurt, memories and beliefs that are limiting beliefs or limiting decisions, and we need to change those so that we are more free to live our lives. And so the meta place is where we take every client. And so every coach needs to know how to take a person there.
And we take a person there based on the questions that we ask.
Exactly.
And also, I think as we listen to the client, what the client says, be able to put where in his meta place with
Exactly.
what he's saying, where is it?
Yep.
Is it part of representation, or is it on background knowledge? Is it on anticipating?
So I look for the pain. What inside your meta place is painful? This painful memory, this painful idea, this painful thought, this painful belief. I can't do this. That sounds like that's not fun. That sounds like that's painful. Let's go there, see what that's made out of. When did you learn that? How did you learn that? Are you committed to keeping that? You're willing to change it?
So at any given place, I mean, in the meta place, change can
Yes,
occur.
exactly. So here's a picture of the meta place, one of our new pictures of it. And so up, away into the meta place we go. That's the magic. You think. To think is to go inside to the inner world. And so in that inner world are going to be lots of different things. We have a couple more pictures that will be doing that. And so in this hourglass, we live our lives in the bottom of that glass, in the real world where we're acting and seeing and hearing and feeling. But it's all driven by the upper world, this meta place world.
So when you say a client can get up in content, you're talking about the lower
Yeah, they're caught up in the
part,
content,
on the funnel. I mean, their
the lower hourglass.
lower part. Yeah. So our job is to facilitate the process of the client going to their meta place by asking all of these questions, the beliefs, the assumptions, and all. And that's what we mean when we say meta coaching.
Yeah.
We're not just coaching.
So the phrase there, to think, is to go inside. And you go inside to that inner world. So we've covered these 7 distinctions. No, these are the 7 distinctions of coaching. The conversation, the self-reflexive, in-depth conversation, the fact that we're mind-body systems, mind-body emotion systems, change, and then execution, that is implementation, so that we make real what we have as potential. Self-actualization, actualizing your best self. And then coaching, of course, is the process of facilitating all of that. So that's what coaching is, or those are the key variables. And then we've got models in meta coaching. And this is the structure of meta coaching, in that the models gives us a way to manage and handle these distinctions. And so we teach each of these models one by one, from beginning with NLP, then the meta states model. And then we go through some of the other models that the more you learn that model, the more you can do things with it. And the things that you do with it fit into the components of coaching. So to do a little summary here, what is coaching? Putting all of that together. It's a conversation that gets to the heart of things. So we go inside to the meanings. And that's what the meta place is all about, the meanings. It's an in-depth conversation that works with the unspoken things in the back of the mind. If it only worked with what's on the front of the mind and the conscious things, you really wouldn't need a coach. Just talk to anybody. But coaching gets to what's not so conscious and what's in the back of the mind. And we'll talk about the process by which you do that in just a moment. Coaching is a mind-body conversation. It works holistically with a person's whole system. And this is really what makes it complicated. Because I don't just think, I think, feel. I don't just think, feel, I think, feel with my body. So if I wake up and I'm not feeling so good, I got a cold or a flu, the body really influences the thinking, feeling. So it's a whole system. And it's a system that you've been building, I've been building for years. So I've got this background knowledge. And so that is a system of knowledge that's influencing me today. It cannot not. And then there's the system of language, and the system of culture, and the system of family, and the system of religion, and the system of ethnics. And we live in multiple systems. And so being able to identify which system is being activated right now, and is it helping or is it hurting? Is it empowering or is it disempowering? Is an important piece of the coaching conversation, trying to get to the heart of things. Coaching is a transformational conversation that's going to facilitate change in a person who is basically psychologically healthy. And so we're not talking about therapy here. Coaching is a facilitative conversation. It's going to work at the meta level to a client's experiences and to the processes of discovery and change. And this is where most coaching in most coaching schools, they aren't able to get there. It ends up just being behavioral coaching, performance coaching, and then they wonder why it works and then it stops working. It works and then it stops working. And that's because they didn't change the inner game. They didn't go meta to the processes. So say you learn you go to a coach and you learn how to learn. And so you learn some learning techniques. But at the meta level, you still have some frames of mind that learning is boring. I'm not a good learner. Learning is hard. And if you still have those things, then yeah, you learn this piece, but you're not a generative learner. You're not a joyful learner. It hasn't really changed who you are. You're just now managing one little piece. And so coaching is this facilitative conversation at the meta level. And so we do meta learning. We do meta communication. We do meta decisions. And when you change it at that level, everything changes. It cascades down throughout the whole system. Coaching is a conversation that both implements change and measures change. Here is something else very unique to meta-coaching, and as of today, 2023, as far as I know, there's not a single coach training program anywhere at any of the 170 universities or any of the coaching programs that does benchmarking of specifics. And so we added that to the meta-coaching model back in 2004, the benchmarking. We can measure change. We can measure leadership. We can measure compassion. We can measure integrity. We've got ways of measuring intangibles. And that's an important piece, because otherwise, how do you know it actually worked? And it's not just hallucination. How do you know it actually worked and it's not just placebo effect? Coaching is a conversation that unleashes potential so that a person can be fully who he or she is. So there's our summary of what coaching is and why it is and is becoming more and more a profession, and needs professional training and certification for someone to do it well.
As you are actually defining what coaching is, it's very encouraging actually for people with options meta program like me to think structurally so that we can facilitate the conversation even more. And every time in ACMC you would emphasize it's not just a bag of tricks. You say it's knowing when to do it, how to do it, with whom, and why, and these are all, this is the structure. So we'll be able to answer all of those questions.
So we take these key components that we've just mentioned, and now we ask, how do we make these systematic so that we can answer the question you just asked? How do you know what to do? When to do it? With whom to do that particular thing? How to do it? And why? And so this is our systematic question. And if you want to torture a coach from meta coaching or any other school, this is the question to ask them. How do you know what to do? So with every coach program, there's going to be patterns and processes and techniques. And some people, they get so caught up in techniques The technique. But the technique without the attitude is going to be ineffective. When to do it? When's the right time? You may know what to do, and you may be very skilled in doing it, but if your time is off, that's not the exact time to do that. So the timing. With whom? Once again, how to read a person, that their personality, their meta programs, that this would fit for the way they think and feel. How to engage in the process, that's where the skills and competencies come in. And then why? Why do that particular thing at that particular time? And so if you walked into a coaching conversation in a coaching room and you said, stop, tell me, what are you doing? Why are you doing it right now? Why are you doing it right now with this person? How are you going to do it? Why are you doing that? If they could answer that, they would be thinking very strategically and structurally. They know what they're doing. If they go, I'm hoping that this will work, they probably don't know the structure of the coaching process.
I'm also guessing that as we become more familiar with the structure of meta coaching, for us coaches, we will not be lured into the content of what the client is saying. And when we listen to what the client is saying, especially meta comments or phrases, we'll be able to place it and then, ask in a way that will get the person deeper into the meta place.
Yeah. This is how we keep coaching and the conversation relevant. Relevant to the person, relevant to the person's goals and objectives at any given moment. Some people are great conversationalists. They can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but then nothing changes. It's a great conversation. I really enjoy talking with you. But we got off the subject, then we got off that subject, and then we got off. And what I wanted to talk about, we really didn't focus on. And so what you just described is how to keep it relevant, how to keep it focused on that person. And to do that, you need to know where you are in relationship to that person at any given time. So, for effective coaching, you got to get 5 things right. First of all, you got to get your psychology right. There's a lot of coaching, quote unquote, that's going on around the world that actually is therapy, called coaching, and they're looking for problems. And they're doing therapeutic processes, and they're expecting resistance, and they're anticipating transference. And a lot of therapists who only charge, maybe they charge $50 or $100 an hour, and they hear coaches who charge $200 an hour, and they go, ooh, I could be a coach. I'd make a whole lot more money. And this is happening all over the world, in every country. And so the psychology of coaching is humanistic psychology, or we call it self-actualization psychology. It is for the psychologically healthy and people who want to be challenged. A therapy client doesn't want to be challenged, they want to be healed. They don't want to be challenged, they want peace and the internal war to stop, because they're in torment. They're suffering from trauma. A coaching client wants to be challenged. Bring it on. Help me to step up. And so they want to have disequilibrium, whereas a therapy client wants equilibrium. Also, if you get a therapy client and you're doing coaching, they probably don't have the ego strength to handle it. And when you challenge them, you could actually make things a lot worse for them. So that's why we have the distinctions between who is coachable. So getting the psychology right, getting the objective right. The objective is to be a process expert to elicit the client's agenda, his or her outcome, and its measurement. And so the objective, I have no objective until they tell me what they want, which is why, again, what you said earlier, you can't start coaching until you know what they want. If I start coaching before I find out what they want, I'm operating on my agenda. And therefore, I'm imposing what I think they should think and feel and do. And we don't consider that respectful. And so you got to get the objective right, and that's their agenda. Another thing to get right, you got to get your change right. So we're not talking about remedial change, therapeutic change. We're not talking about that kind of change. We're talking about generative change. And the difference is a remedy is when something's broken. You break a bone and you need a remedy. You need to go to the hospital, get it set, and then put into a cast. And so that's the remedy. And so people who are broken, and that's what therapy is all about, something's seriously broken inside. Something's wounded inside. Finding that wound and healing it is remedial change. Well, we don't do that kind of change. We do generative change. What new and different and exciting things do you want to learn to be able to do? And that's generative change, generating something new. You got to get your epistemology right. Epistemology. This is how do you know that you know? Epistemology. And so because of the system, it's going to be systemic, it's going to be holistic, not linear, and not seeing things partially, but seeing things as a whole, and not things that dichotomize. One of the cognitive distortions is either or, black or white. And this is the world that children live in. And we all lived in it when we were children. And when we became teenagers, we started realizing between either and or, there's all kinds of grays. And we started realizing there's things in between. It's not always either or. But we still live in a world, and most of our societies in the world still operate either or. They dichotomize. Is it your mind or your emotions? Well, I've got to choose. It's a false choice. Plus, you can't. Because whatever you think, you're going to have feelings. Whenever you have feelings, you're thinking. Are you weak or strong? And the true answer is yes. Some aspects I'm strong, some aspects I'm weak. And so moving out of that simplistic, either or, dichotomizing world. Abraham Maslow said, dichotomizing pathologizes, and all pathology dichotomizes. And that this is one way to split a person apart. Should I focus on my work and my career, or my family and my love life? Stupid question. The answer is do both. You don't have to force it into that kind of dichotomous thing. So getting the epistemology right is really important. And if you can't hear either or, black and white, these kinds of separations in the way, and challenge that with people, then your coaching will be really pretty inadequate. And you'll encourage people. I've been doing a series of executive coaching on Saturday mornings with Malaysia and Philippines, Singapore groups of MENA coaches. And I can't tell you how many times when I started working with the executive, I said, what do you want? And it's like, well, I need to focus on this and stop focusing on that. And it's like, I think the agenda is wrong. I think we need to rethink everything, and so, but accepting it and then asking about it and bringing about a new integration.
And I'm guessing even before we can even ask, an insight came to mind as you're saying these things. It's important for us coaches to be aware of the kind of thinking also that we're doing, because, and being aware of our own meta programs.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if we think in terms of like the static thinking, and if we're also doing either or, we can't coach well, otherwise it's going to be on the superficial thing.
This is one of the reasons for meta coaches we send out a list of cognitive distortions, and ask meta coaches to use those and to give this as reading material. And then as a client is talking about an experience, how many cognitive distortions were involved in that story? It's to become aware. And of course, if you're not aware of the cognitive distortions, it's awful hard to catch it in your clients. Mm-hmm. The fifth thing to get right is the conversation. The conversation needs to be unique and intense and intimate, not advice giving, not therapeutic, even though it will be therapeutic. That's not the purpose of it. Storytelling. And so a lot of times people who come and listen to a coaching session for the first time are surprised by how intimate it becomes so quickly, becomes so personal. And I have clients who constantly say within the first 5 or 10 minutes, I've never told anybody this, but, and that's because they feel safe, and it's a confidential place, and we've gone real deep. We're not just talking surface things, we're talking the deeper things. And so getting the conversation right so that it's not just a chat, it's not advice giving, it is facilitating a person to get acquainted with themselves, their deeper selves.
I remember when you would coach these executives, one common comment is that there's depth. I've come deep. I got to know myself even more, or these are questions that I wouldn't even ask myself. And so, so as a coach, to facilitate that by, the structures that you have been showing us.
So 7 competencies. So now we're taking the structure, the larger structure, and we're bringing it down to smaller structures. And in meta coaching, we have 7 core skills. We have more than just 7 at the PCMC level. There's another 7 skills, but these are the core ones, and they're simple skills, but they're very profound, and actually they're pretty complex when you get into them. So the first 2 skills, listening and supporting, these are skills to create a relationship with a person. And so I earn my right to be trusted by truly listening and truly supporting that person. I'm there, have no agenda of my own, and the purpose is to support that person. So creating that relationship. Until the relationship is created, you can't coach. So we spend time doing that. Once we have that connection, then we can explore. And we'll do that with questioning and meta-questioning. And so the primary tool of coaching is asking questions, inquiring. Now, some people, they don't take questioning too well. And so helping a person know, now when I coach, I'm not going to give you any advice. When I coach, I'm not going to suggest to you what to do, because it's your life. I don't know. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to ask you lots of questions. I'm going to ask you stupid questions and dumb questions and what will seem like irrelevant questions. But the questions is to help me to understand you on your terms, and the questions will invite you to go in to the meta place. The mirroring skills, receiving and giving feedback. And this is what creates that confrontation with people, getting a sense of how they come across. And most of the time in polite society and interactions, we just don't share that information. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But in coaching, let me stop. Let me tell you how I'm experiencing you. And so we give feedback. Now, we learn how to calibrate. We calibrate. I might say, let me give you some feedback. Your breathing has just changed now as we started talking about your mother. What's going on? And so we give feedback as we calibrate. And then the experiential skill is inducing state. And this is what makes coaching not an academic, intellectual, rationalizing conversation. It's an experience. And if a person isn't feeling and experiencing, then you're not coaching. And so we are inducing a state. What state? Well, hopefully a learning state, curious state, a respect of self state, a valuing of life state. So we're going to induce several states, and then of course what state they want. And so these are the core skills that we start with. And this is the basis in meta coaching of what we do with our benchmarking. We have benchmarked each of these skills. We have identified something like 20 sub-skills under each category. And now we can pretty well detect when this intangible thing, listening, supporting, questioning, is occurring.
When you were talking about the inducing state, to be able for the client to have that experience, you would often say about the use of our voice as coaches. So tell us more about like the importance of the voice.
Well, this is where, from a systems point of view, is not only what we say, but it's how we say it. And so to create an experience, the tone of voice, tempo of voice, the use of voice is going to be key in helping a person experience it. So if we're talking about appreciation and the person wants more gratitude in their life, oh, you want more gratitude in your life? Okay, so what are you grateful for? If I talk with a tempo that doesn't express gratitude with a tone, but if I say gratitude, grateful, your heart reaches out to something. What are you grateful for? The way I say it is going to influence the person along with the words, what I'm saying.
Now, so one thing I notice about in terms of the exploration skills, a lot of coaches, well, my experience as well, when I would like benchmark, the questioning skills are there, but the meta questions are often left out. What will help a coach remember to ask meta questions, so that the client will get to the meta place? Because the way for a client to get into the meta place at the back of the mind is really through the meta questions.
Probably the frame of reference, I haven't coached until I've taken a person inside to the meta level. If you have that frame of mind, I have not coached until I take the person in to their beliefs, their values, their intentions, their memories, their hopes, their dreams, their anticipation. If I haven't taken them there, I haven't even started coaching. All I've done is grounded it in current reality, but I really haven't gone to the inner game. And if you know that, then you'll be more likely to ask about that.
So having that as a frame of mind as we coach.
Yep.
Okay.
You haven't coached until you take them to the meta place. Write that down. Put that in big letters in your coaching room. Meta coaching is about frames, and here's a little diagram of the frames that we've been talking about. And we've mentioned all of these except symbols, stories, expectations, meanings. And so we go to these frames of mind. It's these frames of mind that creates a person's attitude. And their attitude is the driving force behind their lifestyle and whatever it is that they're doing. And so we work with the frames, and we want to go there. And so just asking any of these as questions. What decision have you made? Have you made a decision? Is it a strong decision? Is it an empowering decision? If you made a brilliant decision and an empowering decision, what would it be? And so just asking questions about these levels, these are meta levels, then it helps to get into that meta place. With meta coaching, as you go into the meta levels, you're going to be exploring a matrix of meaning. And so every one of the meta levels is a form, an expression of meaning of some sort. And so if we ask somebody who wants to lose some weight, what does it mean to you to lose weight? And whatever they say is their meanings. And we can, if they're struggling with that, they're going to say something not empowering, something limiting. To lose weight is to deny yourself pleasures. All right, so that's what it means to you. Let's say that's true. You're denying yourself pleasure. What does that mean to you? And so whatever they say, well, it's like it's a struggle, it's hard, I probably won't be able to keep it up. It's hard, it's a struggle, won't be able to keep it up. Let's say that's true. What does that mean to you? It's futile. Why bother? And what we're getting is a hierarchy of meanings. The winds of thought have layered this, and then layered that, and then layered that. And the winds of thought has created this whirlwind, this hierarchy of meaning. And there's lots of energy in it. Because every time one of these layers come, there's going to be emotion with it. There's going to be energy with it. And so it's just a whirlwind, a hierarchy of meaning. And every one of us has 1,000 hierarchies of meaning in our head. Pick up some subject. What does that mean to you? What do you believe about that? What do you remember about that? What do you anticipate? What do you expect? And so this is what we find when we coach, by finding these hierarchies of meaning, hierarchies of belief, hierarchies of intention, hierarchies of value. And it's like inside consciousness, there are these whirlwinds of thought that's creating all this energy and driving me. And it can be, as in that instance, a real problem. No wonder it's not working for you. So, and what we're talking about is the metastating process. We're layering thought and feeling upon thought and feeling. Frame is always the problem, never the person. And this is one of those meta frames that we put there, because if you go in and you find out, oh my God, I have just been defeating myself with my meanings about losing weight. What's wrong with me? Why am I this way? So if a person does that, they're making themselves the problem. And so I say at the very beginning, and I say it again and again, now listen, if we find a frame or a set of frames, and that's the problem, not you. If I had those frames, I'd have the same problem. And so the problem is the frame, not the person. And this is what allows and encourages people, let's go find the frame. Let's go find out what frame I've taken on that's creating this distress. so that I can clean it out.
What I notice is that also in the coaching sessions that you've done with the executives, when you put this as a pre-frame at the start of the coaching conversation, saying that the frame is the problem, not the person, that actually creates a feeling of them being safe to actually explore what's at the back of our mind. And so for coaches, it's key for us to see what are these hierarchy of meanings that this coachee has been doing in his mind, and being able to mirror that
Exactly.
and challenge it as well. Right.
Here's the diagram of the meta place, a little bit more distinct here. And so we have at the bottom the primary state, stimulus response. We got the thinking patterns, and then moving up into the meta state funnel, or the self-reflexive funnel. Time is mapped out in this particular diagram with the background knowledge and then the anticipation. So past and then future. And at the very top, we got all kinds of systems and things. And so being able to somewhat have a picture of the meta place, and this gives us a beginning of a way to think about it and the levels there and what's going on, helps us to then manage some of the coaching.
So is that the picture that you just presented? Is this something for us coaches that you would recommend to have a visual representation in our minds as we coach?
I draw this as I coach. So it's not only a picture in my mind, but it's an ongoing developmental picture as someone says, is that a belief? So I put that as a belief. Is that an intention? So what do you remember about that? So I'll write it over there. And your anticipation is what? You're expecting what?
Okay.
And so there are all of these facets of the mind. And of course, this is the next book, The Meta Place.
Yeah. So this is how you, when you write on paper the landscape, this is actually what's in your mind.
This is
as
much more
reference.
detailed than the matrix model, which is the model that we've been using in meta coaching for many, many years. Here is the big problem. Bring a negative state against yourself, and you create self-abuse. So the words there is contempt of self, then judging self. And so while positive emotions are wonderful when they refer to the outside world, I'm angry at, or I'm afraid of, or I'm sad about. If I bring fear or anger or sadness to myself, this energy has nowhere to go except against my mind and my body. This energy goes there and I can do something with it. I can stand up for what's right. I can get away from what's dangerous. I can do my emotional work about a loss. But when it goes against myself, it's going to be this negative energy against my mind and my body, which I think is the source of all psychosomatic illnesses. And if we could stop that. So, so this is one thing we learn. We listen for in coaching, where a person is in self-abuse or self-attack, because to the extent that they are wasting their energy, and their energy is being destructive and counterproductive, and that's one of those frames that, because they're bringing that frame against themselves, that they have to stop. And it is so common.
So when we ask the meta questions of what do you think about that, or how do you feel about that, so that's one way for us to see if the person is actually like
Yeah.
in self-sabotage. Okay.
So in meta states, this is some of the training we do in meta states. Start with anything. Maybe you made a little mistake or you embarrassed yourself. What do you think about embarrassment? I hate it. Oh, you hate your embarrassment. Let's say let's say that's true. What do you think about hating your embarrassment? Well, I'm angry at hating my embarrassment. Well, let's say that's true. You're angry at hating your embarrassment. Well, now I'm ashamed of myself. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And being able to hear that, let me present this to you. You get embarrassed, now you hate it, now you're angry at it, now you're ashamed of it. You've been living inside that world. That's been your subjective world. Is that a party? Do you enjoy that? Do you want to keep it? Or have you had enough? Now they're in a place where they can evaluate, they can observe and evaluate their own choices of frames and hopefully make a good choice. No, I'm tired of that. I don't want to do that.
And so as we present it to the client and the client becomes aware and we actually induce them in a state of moving away from that and towards with the use of our voice as well. So they're at choice point to now make that decision.
Yeah. It's one of the principles of change. You can't change what you're not aware of. You can't change what you don't own. And so we're inviting people to do that. So this is creating the self-abuse, which is so foundational to the metastates model. Here is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And clients come, and they may be at the bottom there with the deficiency needs. They need to learn how to survive, food and shelter and just a job and money. Or they may need safety, security, a sense of order and stability in their world, or the social connection of love and affection and belonging, or the sense that they're important in their group, the social value of self. And so a lot of coaching is helping people understand how to cope effectively with these basic needs of life. So a lot of coaching is that. As people take care of that, they're going to release more and more energy, more and more vitality, and now they're ready to move to the higher levels. And the higher levels, the being needs, are needs for meaning and knowledge and beauty and contribution and justice and fairness and order and giving of love and just all of the higher values there. And for most people, this is the meaning of life. Life is not just getting by with the lower needs. It's living for something bigger than myself, beyond myself. And so at what level is a person operating? And as people learn how to take care of some of their needs, they keep moving up this hierarchy of needs. And so this is essential for unleashing potential. And sometimes a person is trying to live at the higher levels, but they've got holes in the foundation of the lower levels, and they need to take care of that. They need to be sleeping well, eating well, taking care of themselves, having friends and loved ones. They need to take care of that so that they can live their highest values.
So as coaches, it's important for us to ask ourselves at what what level is my client operating on these levels?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so having that in mind as well.
Or using the self-actualization assessment scale, which is a tool that we've put together that helps a person know where they're in the red zone or the green zone.
So when we have that coaching toolkit, when we give to a client, you mentioned earlier about giving them a copy of the the cognitive distortions. So they'll be aware of how they're thinking, and also you would recommend us also to give the self-assessment scale.
Yeah. Yep. Someone give me a time frame when it's 15 minutes before 1, because I want to spend the last 15 minutes entertaining questions from everybody. Okay, so how much time do we have before then? 30 minutes, okay. So this is another diagram on clients' needs. And once again, to understand a need, we have to go to the meta place. We have to go to the meanings. The meaning you give to your need is the instinct that you'll be living. It's one of the basic principles that we operate from, so that helping a person adjust to their biological needs and handle that effectively. I mentioned the matrix model, and here's a diagram of the matrix model. It was a systems model. It is a systems model that we have been using in meta coaching since 2002 as a way to sort out 8 things from a person. Obviously, the first thing is their state. So what state are you in? And then that state is going to be created by their meanings and their intentions. There's 5 things about self: who you are as a person, what you can do, your powers, so your capacities, your confidences, your social self, who you are in relationship to other people, who you are in time, your temporal self, your experience of you, younger you, and the you that will become in the future, and then the roles that you play in the world. So the 5 things there at the base are actually 5 meta-level aspects of yourself. So the matrix model, unlike the meta place, just has these 8 distinctions. So it's a simpler model. And by asking questions about each of these, we can model any experience. So if we take losing weight, what does it mean? What's your intention? How do you experience your value? Are you unconditionally valuable, or you'll only be valuable if you lose weight? If and when. And then it's conditional. What are your power skills of losing weight? What social relationships can support it or undermine it? What kind of a time frame are you thinking? So if you got 50 pounds to lose and you're thinking 2 weeks or 1 month, here's a mental map that's just not going to work. And then the roles that you play and how that may affect it. So this gives us a way to look at multiple things inside a person's inner game about an activity.
And like what you always say, we bring ourselves everywhere we go. So we bring all of these with us, or each person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a simple version of the meta place. And so
Yes.
it's a beginning place. Here's another picture of the matrix model and the different facets there. And you can do a lot with just these sets of questions about these pieces.
So having this in mind, as we also ask like the meta questions, and as we think about the meta place, the diagram of the meta place. So these things, these structures help us as coaches identify where the client is at as we ask questions and as they answer.
So one of the things we teach the meta coaches is listen for how a person talks. A person is thinking about doing something. I could never do that. Well, from the matrix model, self. I could never do that. I could never do that. Time. I could never do that power. I could never do that, the world. And so if you listen to where they put emphasis on a simple sentence, then you can really work with a person and know where to go in your next questions.
So that would be like a semantically loaded phrase as well, and explore that. And so how the client also says it is something for us
critical.
to keep in
Yeah.
mind.
Basic coaching format. And so we're moving up to the meta levels to explore a matrix of meaning around something. We're going to ground it in some grounding event, and we're going to go up to see how it is now structured. And this is the structure of meta coaching, and it helps us to identify the structure of a client's experience. And once we identify the structure, oh, that's how it's built. That's how it's put together. That's how it's organized. Then we can redesign new frames, activate a new state for new and more improved activities. And so as a basic coaching format, where and when, with whom, what are you thinking, and then just map it out. Does it work? Does it need to be streamlined? Does it need to be improved? If we took that out, what would you like to think and believe and understand and set intentions? And so this is what we're calling a basic coaching format. You can use this in any coaching session.
Yeah. So it's important for us coaches to ground the conversation, have enough content, and then go into the level of
Yep. We
the
recommend
client's
20%
needs.
content, 80% process.
And when you say process, which is what you have just
Yeah.
been showing us.
Yeah. Another tool that we use in meta coaching, and it helps us also with the structure, is meaning and performance axes. And so every experience is a function of meaning and performance. So we have the vertical axes and the horizontal axes, because you take any behavior, whether it's leadership, whether it's wealth creation, whether it's delegating, whether it's parenting, there is what you do, performance, and then the meaning of that performance to you and to the other. And so when we put this together, now we can begin mapping out the distinction on the meaning axes and the performance axes. The meaning axis is what creates the quality and the attitude of that experience. The performance gives us the quantity and the empirical facts of it. And when we put that together, then we have the self-actualization quadrants. And the first diagram there, low meaning, low performance, is where all of us are when we're born, and it's where we are when we start a new project. So if I was going to start a new project on playing the piano, I would have low meaning, low performance, because I really don't know that much about it and don't have any skill with it yet. If I develop some skill, I might move over to quadrant 2, and because some people are wired for music, or wired for math, or wired for athletics, or wired for visual, kinesthetic, spatial awareness, sometimes when a person starts doing something, it just comes natural, and they can do. So they be in quadrant 2, high performance, but low meaning. If someone moves to quadrant 3, they've got high meaning. They've been studying it, learning it, and seeing the value of it, appreciating it, understanding it, the knowledge of it. But they're still over on the performance axes at low level. So it's high meaning, low performance. And then, of course, quadrant 4, high meaning, high performance. So the second diagram, now we got the undeveloped, we got the performers or the workaholics. We got the creators or the dreamers in quadrant 3. And so being able to position yourself as to where you are. What's the quality of your performance? What's the meaningfulness of it? Now we can identify where we are and in what zone we are. And as we do that, we're moving to quadrant 4, self-actualization, to where eventually we can move to peak performance. But until then, we're in that flow zone. That's where all the arrows are, the flow zone. And it's just the right mixture. It's the right synergy of just enough meaning, just enough performance that it's optimal. And if you're in that optimal way, then the continuous improvement as we move up into quadrant 4. So from what direction will you be coming to get into that flow zone in the middle?
So as coaches, it's important for us also to be able to tell where our client is at in terms of this quadrant, and be able to challenge if there's the imbalance. So our goal is for us as coaches to move them into that quadrant 4.
If you're coaching a lot of business people, most business people will be in quadrant 2. They're doers, they're performers, they're workaholics, and they do, and they've been rewarded for it, so they get a lot out of it. And when you coach them, what is uncomfortable for them is moving up the meaning scale. Stop doing and reflect. Give it new, enriched meanings. And this will be very uncomfortable. It'll be counterintuitive. It'll be the last thing they want to do. A lot of people are dreamers, and they're in quadrant 3. And they have this idea, and then they have this idea, and they get excited about this, but they don't do. Because doing is scary. You know, what if I make a mistake? What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? And so they tend to have more dreams and more dreams. And so what's counterintuitive for them, just do something. Just take some action and see what happens.
So this is where, as coaches, we challenge them. Before we can even challenge them, we got to know where they're at.
Where they're at.
Okay, thank you.
Here's another diagram, same thing, moving to this self-actualizing quadrant, and the dreamers and the performers. So I'll skip that. Here's a diagram that David Murphy created of the same thing. He always really makes it look much nicer than my diagrams. And so this gives us a definition of self-actualization. Self-actualization is the synthesis or the synergy of meaning and performance. And so I don't know how many people I've said, you have great meanings, but we don't have the synergy of your performance in it yet. Or you have great performance, we just need to get the synergy of meaning into it, and then you'll be in that self-actualization flow chart. Change. So helping a person change and knowing at what level to change, and here's a diagram of levels of change. Of course, if you don't change and you do the same thing again and again, if it's working, that's what you would want to do at level 0. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's working. And so you'd be at that level. But if you want to improve things, then you'd move to the next level, continuous change, because now you're expanding your range of behaviors. Now you can do it with more excellence, more expertise, more exquisitely, more elegantly, and maybe expanding behaviors. And so this would be continuous change in something that you're doing pretty well, and let's just push it further, expand it. Discontinuous change, we're going to stop doing what we're doing, and we're going to put in new behaviors, completely new behaviors. Let's not do it that way. If we do it this way, this will expand it so much more. And so it's discontinuous from what you've been doing, and now you're adding new behaviors completely. And sometimes this will be the change from one level of life to the next level of life. To move to that level, we have to stop doing this and do that. This 15 minutes. This will be really true for people in organizations and businesses. If a person is a supervisor, they've got to stop doing some supervisory work and just do pure management. If they're in management, eventually have to stop doing management and do executive role. If they are managing as an executive, they're probably micromanaging.
Right.
And so that would be discontinuous change. Evolutionary change is evolving yourself, your person, to the next level so that you become more. And it's a next level of development as you're evolving and becoming more than and different from what you were. And so as we go through stages of life, we have one level of thinking and feeling as an adolescent. And hopefully we evolve to becoming a young adult. We evolve to becoming a more mature adult. And so evolving through the stages of life and development. Revolutionary change is when we change the whole direction. And we say, instead of this direction, I want to go this direction. I've been selling for this company. I don't want to sell for this company. I want to create and be an entrepreneur and create my own and sell my own things. So a whole new direction, whole new paradigm, whole new intentions. And so at what level of change do you want to make? And when you know the level of change, then we've got the axes of change that can facilitate moving a person through the change processes. So once again, just another structure in the meta-coaching system. So we're going to take some questions from everybody listening. So if you have a question, you want to write it, or if you want to speak it, we want to give you a chance to do that. Really a question about anything that we've covered or about the structure of meta-coaching.
So those attending online, if you have a question, just raise your virtual hand so we can unmute you. And those at the training room, just raise your real hand so we can give you the mic. Or you can raise both.
Or anybody here. We don't want to forget you. One of the easiest ways to ask a question, just to type it in, and we can read it off if you type it.
Okay. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Hi.
Welcome back. About the self-assessment to the client, is there any template for the self-assessment I can share with the client?
Speak a little bit louder.
The self-assessment template or the self-assessment questions, which is a part of the toolkit for the coach. What kind of self-assessment I can give the client? Like what? Questions, like what? Examples?
It's about the self-assessment as part of the toolkit, and she was asking what self-assessment.
So the self-assessment is that hierarchy pyramid, and at the first level, we got 7 different questions. Are you eating sufficiently? Or eating too? And so where would you put yourself on eating? You eating enough? You eating quality? And so the volume and the quality of your eating, is it sufficient to maintain your body weight, a body weight that you want? And so are you in the red and it's deficient in some way, or are you in the green and you're thriving? Same thing with sleep. How much sleep are you getting? Are you getting your 7 or 8 hours a night, which is the average? And the quality of sleep. Are you in the red? Are you in the green? And exercise, we do the same. And so we have 7 questions at the survival. We have about 5 or 6 questions on the safety. Do you feel safe? Do you have a sense that there is structure in your world, and you know, you have a sense of how to protect yourself? In the red, you're in the green. So it just goes up all those levels, and asking anywhere from 5 to 7 questions on each one. And it helps a person to move to move the gauge, whether they're in the red zone, and it's not enough. It's deficient. And deeper, the further you go to the right would be deeper into the red, more deficiency. The more deficiency, the more desperate, and the more things are not working, and there can be illnesses and diseases and stress. The more it gets into green, it gets greener and greener. Deeper green is you're getting by. You're actually doing very well. You're thriving. You're mastering. And so that's how the self-actualization assessment scale is set up, so a person can measure how they're doing with their basic needs.
So if the client is located in the red zone, for example, he's not coachable?
Is not.
Coachable?
He's not coachable.
No, it's very coachable, because here's a need, and hopefully let's work on this now. We've identified that something is wrong with your sleep. You're getting 6 hours, but every once in a while 7 or 8. But the quality of your sleep, you're tossing, you're turning, you're waking up, and you're feeling exhausted when you wake up. So something's wrong with sleep. So what do you believe about sleep? What do you think about it? What's your intention? And this is where we start coaching for better frames about sleep. And then, so how do you do it? What do you do before you go to bed? And is that helping or hurting the sleep process?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we got some things up there. Can you read?
Please, could you share the self-assessment tool?
Okay. Yes, I can. Okay.
Okay. So where can they find the self-assessment?
It's in the Unleashing Vitality training manual, which is on the shop, so you can find it there, and you'll find 5 pages on how to use the scale. So that's in the Unleashing Vitality training manual, which is on the shop.
Michael, is it the same one in the ACMC manual?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The scale is in the ACMC manual, but not the explanation of how to really use the scale.
Okay.
Every MENA coach should receive it right after graduation, as well as the 5 pages of explanation. So what we've been talking about is the structure of meta coaching. And meta coaching is very systematic in that we've looked at what coaching is, we've taken out those variables, we've created structures for how to think about each piece so that you have a sense of, I know what to do and when to do it and how to do it. So it's not just guesswork. And this is what will allow any profession to become truly a profession and a science about it, and especially with the ability to measure by benchmarking.
And I see what you've just presented. Aside from the structure, it actually gives us meta coaches the confidence to be able to coach well, because we have all of these tools, and we just got to use them and practice them and memorize them. So,
Yep.
but we have it. So we have the mechanism, we have the structure to facilitate that for our client.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So are we at the time? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.